I am with Team Phoenix and Associates, who are helping support and get Team Phoenix off the ground. Team Phoenix is the world's first amputee aerobatic display team based out of the UK. So let's kick off by meeting everybody. I'm going to go around my screen, starting with Mike Waldman.
Hello everybody, my name's Mike Waldman. I'm team leader of Team Phoenix. My background is initially as a military pilot in the RAF, then as an airline pilot with 20 years flying for Virgin Atlantic long haul, and now team leader of Team Phoenix.
Hello Mike, and now Jeremy Dyack, who is helping support the team with their ambitions.
Yeah, good morning. I'm part of Team Yakovlevs. We're a UK-based aerobatic formation team based down at Henstridge Airfield in Somerset. We operate a fleet of Russian Yak aerobatic aircraft, and Mike and Alan are using two of the Yak 52 display aircraft that we operate with. So we've been busy training with them this summer.
Welcome, Jeremy. Jez, what's your name? So we'll have to edit this bit in. And I've got Jez, but I haven't got your full name.
Hi, morning. Yes, it's Jez Hopkinson. I'm the team leader of the Yakovlevs, as Jeremy's just alluded to. Our job is to help Mike and Alan move on from their previous training where they were flying the PA-28 doing formation. And we've moved them up, or helping move them up, to a more dynamic and high performance display, incorporating obviously the use of the Yak aircraft, which is much more dynamic, and also to improve their ability to travel around the country and carry out these displays. And we're very privileged to be doing it.
Thanks, Jez. Over to Alan Robinson, who is the other half of Team Phoenix.
Good morning all, I'm Alan Robinson. I'm pilot number 2 in Team Phoenix. By trade I'm an engineer in the Royal Air Force, and essentially I'm a recreational pilot doing some quite cool stuff with these guys.
Very cool stuff. Barry Neal, last but no, by no means least, Barry Neal.
Yeah, good morning everyone. Barry Neal. My background is in the RAF. But I'm a joint CAA-MAA flying display director at Tier 3 level. I first met Mike, I think it was 2018, at an aviation event in Blackbush. And then subsequently, as soon as they formed the Barter Bus Company, I invited him to participate in the Guernsey air display of that year. I run that air display. And if I remember correctly, Mike, I think we were the first ones to offer you the opportunity to display at a public event.
That's absolutely right, Barry, and that's the reason I wanted you to come here today and talk amongst us, because you were definitely the most person who encouraged us the most from the air display, from the flight director community when we first started 2 or 3 years ago. And we're very grateful to you.
Well, thank you for that.
What a great group of people to be in discussion with. So, and you know, guys, do unmute your mic when we're starting to get into a greater discussion here. Question for Mike and Alan. Why have you set up an aerobatics display team rather than opting for any other kind of flying?
I feel like I'll go answer that first. From a visual point of view for the public, there's no doubt that aerobatics is a great thing to watch. It's dynamic and exciting, and from a pilot's point of view, it's the most demanding enterprise that we can do. And so, to make ourselves as attractive as possible to potential display directors, and also to prove the whole concept, which is that disabled people can do as much as anybody else, then obviously it makes sense to try and do the most demanding flying. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah, for me, I think nearly all air displays are aerobatic. So for me, I just think I personally wanted to do exactly the same thing as everybody else is doing. Because I think Mike and I have the ability to do it, and I think, you know, we're in a great place to prove that disabled people can do that. So I just wanted us to have a display that's, you know, similar to everybody else. Well, not similar, but as good as everybody else is, despite the fact that we are disabled.
Also, from a display point of view, we did the first season's display, but the aircraft weren't very dynamic. And the general feeling or feedback we got from the display community was that it was a great idea, and they wanted to encourage us. So we were invited to a number of shows, but they probably weren't going to invite us back another time because the show wasn't dynamic enough. And so obviously that's why we wanted to take it up to a different level.
Can I possibly come in here, Liz, in that?
Of course.
I understand what you're saying, Michael and Alan, about the dynamic side of it. And yes, in the main, members of the public want to see aerobatics. However, I think there is another element to the whole thing as well. One of the reasons why we invited Mike over to Guernsey, in that we're often looking for something different as an air display. And in Guernsey's case, the public, we're always looking for something different to display. And it also gave the team the opportunity to get up close and personal with the public and with the media. The media in Guernsey were extremely interested. We have a Meet the Pilots event on the afternoon before the display, and that's open to members of the public, families, especially children. And it gave them a great opportunity to actually meet Mike and the team, see their aircraft up close and personal, see how the aircraft have been modified, and able to enable each individual to fly according to their own capabilities. So there was that difference element, but I do clearly understand that Mike's point, perhaps, that not everybody was going to invite them back unless they produce something different.
And this brings me on to, thank you, Barry, it brings me on to my next question on, really. Again, back to Mike and Alan, why do you feel the need to be visible with flying that you're doing? What's motivating you?
I think we have an opportunity. We're the first people in the world to do this. And if the opportunity is there to be able to show that the capability for disabled people to do this, then it should be, I think we should exploit it. A number of things have come together to be able to give us this opportunity. The fact that we did the display work 2 or 3 years ago, the fact that we've had the opportunity to be able to use Jez's aeroplanes, which has made it financially viable. All these things, plus Alan and I have now got the capability, training-wise, from our background. All these things have come together to mean that this is a unique opportunity for this to be done. I don't know when it can be done again, and that's another question for the future. But we're here and we have this opportunity, and we can show people what we can do, and we can provide this example to disabled and able-bodied people. And so it seems it would be a real waste not to do it. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah, I think it's just an opportunity for us to showcase ability more than anything else. Because certainly disabled people, well, I think disabled and able alike are inspired by what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. I mean, when I speak to some of the pilots back at my sort of club that I fly in back up in Lincolnshire, they're quite in awe of the fact we've got the opportunity to fly with Jez and the gang in some really quite high performance airplanes. So yeah, what we're doing is quite special, really.
I totally agree, and it bring me on. Actually, I do want to raise this point early on in our conversation, and I'm coming back to you again, Mike. You have said that you hate the word disabled. Could you expand on that? And then maybe it'd be interesting to hear Alan's perspective on it.
Well, it has negative connotations throughout. There's nothing positive, and the word disabled, all it does describe somebody who's limited, or who can't, literally the word means that you're unable to do something. And I think in both of our cases, that's not the case, and same with the Paralympians and magnificent athletes that you see. So I think, yeah, disability is a thoroughly negative word. And I know initially we're talking about the team being called Disabled Aerobatic Team. We talked about it long and hard and decided that we wanted to use the word amputee because it had some positive connotations and not negative ones. It didn't include that word, basically.
Alan, I'd be interested in your thoughts too.
Yeah, sorry, I was having a mute for as we often do. Quite often I find it sort of quite hard to class myself as disabled in so much as, you know, I can do 99% of the things I want to do, and I can do a lot of things that a lot of my friends can't do, as in fly aeroplanes and do aerobatics and fly in formation. So sometimes I find it quite hard to class myself as disabled. But don't get me wrong, when it's raining at home and I don't want to take the dog out, then I can be very disabled. But other than that, it's I think it, you know, we're doing some quite amazing things, and yeah,
if I can point out as well, officially we're not disabled. I applied for a disabled rail pass recently and was turned down for it. It even included a letter from my doctor, and they said that my disability didn't, my amputation didn't classify me as disabled. So, and I think neither of us claim any personal independence payments or anything like that. So, as far as the government's concerned, we're not classed as disabled at all.
I think one of the other things about aviation and flying and the kind of thing we're doing is, even though essentially we are disabled, we have to, you know, meet the same goals and, you know, be able to fly the airplane in the same way as any able-bodied person. You know, the safety aspect is exactly the same. So it's one of the few areas in life where we are on a level playing field with anybody else.
Can I jump in and just reiterate that point? From a training perspective, Mike and Alan get treated no differently to any of our team members, and you know, function in exactly the same way that we do all our other training. So, you know, there is no difference, absolutely none at all. Maybe Jez wants to jump in on that a bit as well.
I agree with Jeremy. I think the area where people tend not to think about is that it's not the flying. You know, Mike and Alan's flying ability is no different once they're in the cockpit. Whether they've got they've lost their leg above the knee or below the knee, they can fly the aircraft. It's the other stuff that's really hard for them. You know, the moving the aircraft around, the getting from A to B, the fueling, the smoking, the oiling, the air, getting up on the wing, getting off the wing, getting strapped in, you know, helmets, parachutes. You know, when you've got all of your limbs, it's quite complex anyway. But, you know, I applaud guys so much because that's the hard area for them. It's not the flying. They're both fantastic pilots already. It's the other work that's incredibly hard for them. And that's the area people tend not to see, which is a shame. But I think Mike's dead right that I love the way that they call themselves the amputees, because it's a much better word. And it does show how amazing the team is, just to keep pushing forward, you know, day in, day out, when it is really quite complex for them.
Well, I'll have a fess here. I'm in awe of all of you. And, you know, so, you know, Mike and Alan, the fact that even before you started the aerobatics display, I know, Mike, you're a commercial pilot with thousands of hours, and Alan, I think, soloed on the Spitfire after 150 hours in a microlight. As someone, the owner of an elderly lapsed PPL, for all of you, I'm like, wow. I'm very interested, actually, I'm going to come back to Jez and Jeremy. What made you want to support the guys so much for Team Phoenix?
Well, it's an honour to teach them, quite frankly. I mean, we knew their reputation. We know Mike and Alan a little bit through the air display community, but you know, for us, it's an honour, and it's, as I said before, it's no more of a challenge really than training anybody else. So, but it has that frisson to it as well. But it also it's something new within the air display world, and the air display world always needs refreshing. And to have these new ambassadors for the UK air display world, I mean, you know, of course we jump at a chance like that. You know, it's been great, and Pops and his son are, you know, they're good fun. Jez, maybe something on the training side from you.
I noticed your little pop-up pops there. Poor old Mike does get quite a lot of banter, but he's very good at taking banter. But that's what it's all about. When you're flying, it's a very professional environment that we're all in, and I know that Barry works very closely with the air display world in the United Kingdom, and it is a very, very high standard, probably the best in the world from a safety point of view now. And so we tend to have quite a lot of fun on the ground, but in the air it's very serious. And that's a good thing about both Alan and Mike, is that they fit in incredibly well. You know, they are relatively new to the air display world, but they do fit in really, really well, which is good. And from a training point of view, they're both very receptive. You know, we fire a lot of information at them and we push them very hard, and it's a big step up. And there's been a few sorties where we've briefed, and you can see they've been a bit wide-eyed as we're wandering out to the aircraft. And you know, not every sortie goes well. You know, we have our ups and our downs, as every team in the world does. But the learning process that they've gone through and the amount they've increased in their ability is phenomenal. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how quickly they've moved on to where they are now, and we are almost ready to launch the two-ship fully aerobatic formation team.
And that's excellent. I will come back to some of the training, as you alluded to, Jez, about it's not the actual flying, and I'd be interested in all of your input on the extraneous to the flying part that are, you know, where could there be some improvements perhaps in you know, maybe controls on aircraft, or and come back to some of that in a minute. I do want to come to you though, Barry. You said that there was a kind of novelty factor almost in when they displayed at Guernsey. I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but here's something new. It's, you know, amazingly inspiring people, but their display had to get better in order to make a thoroughly entertaining air display, because obviously the public, nobody knows who's in the cockpit when you're watching an air display. Can you expand a little bit on that and why you wanted them to up their game?
Well, as I said, I'd met Mike before the actual the former Aerobatics company was formed, and I was intrigued when he explained. I didn't realise he was an amputee when we first met. I was very intrigued when he explained to me how it all came about and in the background. I was also visiting Aerobatics at Blackbush at the time as well. The disabled, use the term loosely, the disabled flying organisation. And I was extremely impressed with what they were doing, what they were offering, and with some of the serious issues some people have who were getting on and being able to fly. And when the team was formed, I simply wanted to give him the opportunity to show everybody what they could do, what was possible, and everything associated with that. And really echoing Jeremy and Jez's comments, that actually the flying side of it is one thing, but actually, as far as an air display is concerned, the organisation is another. We actually had to think, for example, okay, they're going to come across and they're going to stay with us overnight. I'm not being funny, but Guernsey is a little bit backward in some respects, society-wise, and we weren't actually sure if we could find the relevant, appropriate hotel rooms for them with proper disability type disabled facilities. And secondly, we just had to say, well, what extra equipment, if any, do we need to help them in and out of airplanes? So it was an exercise for us in learning, and of course we managed it. We're able to promote them. But as you say, not everybody knows who is in the airplanes and what their background is. If you have a display team, display pilot that simply flies into an air display, displays and departs, you don't have that interaction. We're lucky, certainly with Guernsey, is that we get people in the day before and they are able to interact with members of the public, which of course with the children is education. It forms part of STEM, and it can, air displays encourage the young to perhaps get involved in aviation in all sorts of different ways, not just flying, but in aviation engineering and all sorts of other events. So, you know, at that point, we simply wanted to encourage it and to get the message out there and publicise them more widely.
Thank you. And coming back to you, Alan, as well, and I take your point, and I think just people, I'm a firm believer in visibility for lots of people. The more we see different kinds of people with, you know, this is the whole point of the series I'm doing at the moment, doing interesting things, the better it is, and particularly for young kids. Alan, what are some of the challenges perhaps that I might not think of as a non-amputee person in flying an aircraft? What might be a bit different for you than it might be for someone who isn't an amputee?
For me, I'm an above knee amputee. Some aircraft to fly, I struggle with the brakes, if it's toe brakes or heel brakes or something like that. It can be things like that. And it can be quite difficult to get aircraft adapted to suit disability, in so much as you know, all the modifications have to go through an engineering process and a technical sign-off. And if it's quite a big modification to the aircraft, then that can be quite a long, complex process. But one of the good things about the yaks that we're flying is the brakes are on sort of bicycle type brakes on the control column, so it immediately takes that problem out of the equation. So from that point of view, the yaks are quite good aircraft for us to fly. I think it'll be the same for Mike. But yeah, I mean, as Jez alluded to, a lot of the issues we have are just, you know, the physical aspects of moving the aeroplane around, getting into it, and, you know, turning the props before we start it. So you've done a bit of a workout before you've even got into the aeroplane, and then you've got to, you know, perform at quite a high standard in the aeroplane. So I don't know about Mike, but certainly when I go home after a week's flying with the guys, I'm completely wiped out. It takes me a day or so to recover and sort of and come down from it, sort of emotionally, you know, from a, you know, we've been in our little bubble, sort of doing something amazing, you know, down at Henstridge with the boys, and then you come back to home, back to reality, and back to sitting in front of a computer screen working, which is, you know, it takes me a couple of days to adjust back to reality, as it were.
Yeah, there's definitely a physicality to it, but mentally as well. For each sortie, we're probably briefing an hour ahead, walking through, briefing an hour ahead, then the sortie itself lasts about an hour, and then another debrief. And it's very, very intense, and we're doing that twice a day, and that's more than enough. It doesn't sound very much, you know, an hour and a half's flying, possibly, but it is so stressful and demanding that by the end of a week we are completely whacked, to be honest. Things I find physically on the aeroplane, we have slightly different issues because of above and below knee. Alan has issues with his knee bending, but what it does mean is his leg is actually quite narrow, because mine's below knee, my left leg socket is very wide, and we have an issue where the brake control is on the stick, and it can actually snag into my prosthetic against the control. So we then had to get a cover to go. We adapted a cover to go over the top to make sure it slid past, but that gave it even more width. And as I move my leg to the left, I can often transmit, because the transmit switch is on the left-hand side. So there's lots of issues that, because it's never been done before, that there are dynamics that you have to think about. And certainly we were finding with things like aileron rolls are harder to the left, because I've actually got physical limitations of how much control input I can put in. And also for me, I find during vertical maneuvers where we have to put in rudder input, obviously with both of us it's the same, but you can't feel the input that you're putting in, and so you're having to put in about the right amount. And one way to do it is to pull back with stirrups on the good leg, as opposed to inputting on the bad leg, and so you're almost putting a reverse effect in. So this is all things that we've had to techniques that we've had to learn to adapt to. Don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I do have something similar.
If I can jump in, Al, as well, I think it's really important that people try and understand that this is so brand new that we are learning all the time. I mean, we had a funny incident, I suppose you could call it, the last time we were flying, when we've had to come up with a whole new protocol of the leg coming off in the air. So Alan was flying, and we had a guy obviously in the back we were teaching, and because it was so dynamic, the flying, you know, it was a hot day, it was about 32 degrees. His cup started to get wet from the sweat. So in the end, his leg almost fell off in the air. Now, although it's quite humorous to talk about it, it's a protocol that we have to take into account whilst we're trying to work out how we can ensure that things are safe. So that's another aspect. You know, Mike says, rather than push down on one leg, he pulls on the other. You know, Alan has to be aware now that we have to be very wary that his suction can release, and that can be a problem in itself. So these are other aspects that the guys have got to be thinking about all the time as well.
And this is, I mean, and I'm aware of people's time here because I want to move things. I mean, this is brilliant. So you are really pioneering, not just for yourselves, but for other people who have amputees, like leg amputees, I guess. Because that's, I want to come back to this term disability towards the end of our conversation. But I was wondering, within this community, the aviation and the aerobatics aviation community, obviously there's a lot of massive respect and desire to be with you on this journey. Have you, in other industries outside of aviation, had any experienced discrimination because of the fact that you have your amputees?
I personally haven't. I don't know about you, Alan. What do you think?
Yeah, personally, I've not really experienced that at all. You know, I know it happens, but personally, no, I haven't experienced it.
That is good to hear. And I know too that you are looking for sponsorship to obviously take you further in this journey. What would be your ideal kind of companies, and what kind of sponsorship? Obviously some financial to help you move forward, but what else would you like in sponsorship partners, and what do you think that you could bring to companies who would sponsor you?
Well, the financial side obviously is very important. So the main thing would be funds to cover our training costs. So we're not looking to make really any money out of this, obviously, but taking 2 Yak 52s flying in formation, each hour costs a lot of money, and there's no doubt it's a large financial investment. So yeah, a company that could help towards training costs or help towards fuel is a very large part of the costs of running the team. So covering the fuel costs and that sort of thing. So yeah, it really is it's a financial input. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything to do with a disabled regime. It doesn't have to be a sort of leg manufacturer or anything like that. we will, I think we've shown in the past that we will have significant media attention, I think, from for what we're doing. And so I think we can be a good brand ambassador for any sort of company that would like to be associated with us. I think we are dynamic and eloquent. We can offer a different perspective. We can talk at a level about disability, about STEM, about various issues that possibly other people can't. And so it gives us some sort of authority in that area. And we're unusual, so hopefully we're going to get a lot of coverage.
Can I just add a point as well, which probably Mike was going to come to anyway, is that obviously the air display industry these days has its own attendant responsibility when it comes to its carbon footprint. So all the flying that Mike and Alan are doing, and in fact, and all the flying that we do, is fully carbon offset these days. So I think that's an important fact to make. Yes, we're burning fossil fuels, but these aircraft are 40, 50 years old. So they've effectively offset their manufacturing carbon footprint already. So it's really just for direct use. We were pioneers of a smoke oil in the UK that is fully biodegradable. It's effectively baby oil. It's used in food production machinery and things. So that's very much at the forefront of what we do at the moment as well. And I know that it's an important factor for Team Phoenix.
I'd like to thank you, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Jeremy. It is very important, and as someone who has witnessed many times children being absolutely enthralled and fascinated by air displays, it's great that we still have the ability to go and see amazing flying today in the UK and beyond. Long may that continue. I'd like to just come back and to wrap up with this word disability, and what other kind of phrases, how else could we describe that? Because I'd be interested in hearing from Jeremy, Jez and Barry as well. The idea that you guys are in any way, as you said, that's a kind of disparaging term, the disabled, with what you're doing seems incredible to me. What would be a better way of describing it? What would be a better way of saying how you're inspired? For those of you who are not in Team Flying, members of Team Phoenix, what inspires you about the guys? So I'll throw that to you first, Mike. What would be a better way of describing who you are and where you're at?
Well, I think a better word would be sort of adaptive ability or adaptive performance rather than disability, because it's a focus on what we can do, not what we can't do.
Barry?
I think that's quite a challenging discussion in the end, because, of course, the use of the word disability is worldwide and associated with all sorts of different things. To try and make a change into that would be a mammoth effort, I think. It's a little difficult to think of a suitable word for that, because when you think about, even in government legislation, disabled facilities, all that sort of thing, it's ingrained. It's ingrained in culture, in society, in regulation. So that could be difficult. However, having said that, every small step towards changing something like that may have some impact in the longer term.
I totally agree, and that's why I think languaging is a great place to start. So if you were describing the guys without using the word disability, the ability that they have, what could be a good phrase to say about these gentlemen who are inspiring so many people?
I think from my standpoint, and I would think perhaps from display organisers' standpoint, we would simply follow the line that the team wanted to take. Whatever emphasis, whatever statements they wanted to make in respect of where they stand as individuals and as a team, be very happy to follow that and move that through, rather than try and do something, off the cuff for a particular air display.
I think that's great. Alan, what are your thoughts?
I think that's quite a difficult question. I wasn't expecting that, to be fair. For me, I don't know how you would describe us. I mean, personally, I just describe myself as completely normal, just with a chunk missing. It's and for me, it is normal. If I see myself with, in old photos with two legs, to me that looks really weird. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure how else you would describe us, to be brutally honest. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think saying Aerobatics is a fabulous organisation, and it's the British Disabled Flying Charity. They don't obviously have an issue with it, and if they, you've got to be able to identify who you are or what you're doing to be able to, in their case, get sponsorship and that sort of stuff. And so they're kind of embracing disability, and we're not espousing it, but we're trying to move a little bit further away from it. But I guess we also have to recognise that if we are going to inspire disabled people, we've got to recognise who they are as well. I don't know. Take other people's thoughts on it.
I think it's also we're both amputees, so I think it's quite difficult for us to speak about the challenges that a wheelchair user, for example, might face. I know sort of in aviation, I know when they get out of their aeroplane and they're flown halfway across the country, they might not be able to get to the control tower to have a cuppa. There are other challenges that we probably haven't thought about.
We are a little bit different. Barry was talking about Vardis Bus Company, and the third pilot of Vardis Bus Company was paraplegic, and so his issues, I mean, as far as disability was concerned, were much greater than ours. He struggled to walk, and he could only walk because he had some sort of muscle movement, but he couldn't actually feel himself walking. So things like getting up and down stairs to the briefings and things like that, and just getting in and out of the airplanes. He had much more physical impairment than Alan and I have. And I think the fact that we're amputees and the technical side of things of amputees these days is so good that you can have very little in the way of physical limitation, whereas obviously other people are going to have much more severe disabilities.
Yeah, and I know that's a tough question to throw at you all as well, and it's such a broad brush term for people too. So perhaps then I'll tweak it a bit, and say, Jez, what particularly inspires and motivates you to make sure that Team Phoenix is a success?
I think a lot of it's been alluded to already. I thought Barry really articulated in his last comments about the word disabled. It's almost impossible for us to even think about changing it, because it's just a blanket word. A disability is not necessarily just physical; it can be mental as well, as we're well aware from the media at the moment. But I think what's important also to realise is that with low-level formation aerobatics, there's not like the Olympics where you've got the Olympics and you've got the Paralympics. It's just one group. So Mike and Alan are competing at the absolute highest levels, regardless. They've got to be as good or even better. And there's only a few thousand people in the world that can do what they do. Low-level formation aerobatics is incredibly difficult if you are young, fit, had loads of training already, and here they're coming in, and let's be honest, Mike, you and I we are pushing the boundaries a little bit now, with me being a month older than you, so I've got to be a bit careful. Alan is the youngster, and they both work incredibly hard at this. So it's not just about whether they're amputees. It's also the fact that it's a challenge for everybody, and they've just got more challenges than other people.
So what's made you want to be part of the challenge, you personally, Jez?
That's just exactly what I just said. It's because of the challenge. I love the fact that they step up to it, you know, and it's a roller coaster road, not just for them, but for everybody as well. You know, people that are doing this who have got all of their bits or their chunks, as Alan would say. That was a really good idea to say that, Alan. It is very, very true. But it's for us at the airfield, it's nice to see this new aspect where I think, as Jeremy said, the airshow world needs new things coming in. And whether it is people like Mike and Alan, or, you know, we've got young ladies coming in as well. You know, the air industry, the airshow industry needs to move forward with the times. There aren't that many, you know, females that fly. And we should have more. You know, we need more people that are older as well. Just because you get old, it doesn't mean you can't continue to be able to display. So that's the challenge, really. And that's what I think Jeremy and I both really appreciate.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely preaching to the choir here. You're talking about women and age and just widening the scope of the industry to let more people
I'm just going to say, I think that's one of the things as well. Because Mike and I are actually quite unique. There's not that many people coming through that will be a succession. So I think one of the things we want to do is inspire, you know, a next generation of disabled pilots that might be able to, you know, step into our shoes once we've, you know, got too old and grey and don't want to do it anymore. So hopefully we'll be able to do that and, you know, inspire the next generation of disabled pilots.
We need to get lots of sponsorship and coverage, don't we? So Jeremy, just final word from you then. What's brought you into wanting to be so supportive of this whole initiative?
We love a challenge, not that it's been that much of a challenge, to be honest. The guys have been fantastic. And, you know, I think we need to talk about the fact that they're ambassadors, and they're not ambassadors for disability, they're ambassadors for their capability. You know, so I mean, how inspiring for someone who may find themselves unfortunately in a similar situation, thinking they're limited in what they can do. And, you know, here we've got two guys, you know, performing at the very highest level. So, you know, I think that's incredibly inspiring. And so, you know, of course, it's a real honor to be involved in it. Yeah, I can't say more. It's a great.
I've got to say, personally, for Jez and Jeremy, it's not just this year. 2 or 3 years ago, when we started Bardas Bus Company, they took us under their wing, invited us down to Henstridge, and basically kind of gave us 2 or 3 days of secrets to how to run a successful display team. And, you know, from the very foundation of how to brief, how to conduct yourself, and that was all before we'd thought of anything with the acts and things. So they've been very supportive for about 3 years now to us, so we're very grateful.
Sorry, when's the first time that we can see, or next time that we get to see you display?
Well, we haven't finished our training yet, so we still need to do that and get our display authorization. We were hoping to be ready for the end of this season, but there's been lots of challenges, and so I think it'll be the start of next season. So the early shows next year. I've spoken briefly to the organisers at Duxford, who have been very supportive to us before, and I think there's an early show in Duxford in May. So all being well, hopefully there'll be that sort of timescale, I would think.
So shout out to the organisers at Duxford, really looking forward to seeing Team Phoenix as part of the lineup. So thank you very much, everybody. Is there anything anyone wants to say that hasn't been said?
Yeah, just on that, we haven't actually been booked for the International Air Tattoo at Fairford next year, which is the world's largest military air show, a real feather in our cap, and a real challenge for us to be to a standard that we're not going to sort of let ourselves or anybody else down. So that's a really big deal. There's 100,000 people on the ground, and so that'll be in July of next year.
So if anyone's looking out for Team Phoenix, you can see them at the Royal and International Air Tattoo next year, next summer. So make sure that you book early and get your tickets.